All right, well, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Have my next guest here, Carolyn, who is a author, speaker, has her own YouTube channel, um, does so many different things as a guest speaker that I think is really important for military families, especially to hear this. She's had some, I would call it some not great experiences coming up where she faced some bullying and other circumstances. So, Carolyn, thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, Carolyn, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I grew up, and I do have like the most loving, amazing family. But every time I went to school, I always felt like I never fit in. And I did struggle with bullying from a pretty young age. I was in third grade when I got a death threat. And from then on, it kind of just transpired into me thinking I wasn't enough. And then as I was growing up and going into middle school and high school, I kind of, still dealt with bullying. So for a lot of my life, I definitely struggled not feeling like I fit in or not feeling like I was enough. And then, as I grew up, as I got older, it just turned into anxiety, depression, and unfortunately, there was self harm at some point in my high school experience.
Yeah. And so when did you first notice or first get diagnosed with some kind of whether it's a learning challenge or when was the first time you got exposed to that?
Yeah, so, I got to my sophomore year of high school and then I wasn't doing well on the standardized tests that you needed to graduate. And so I basically got tested to figure out why I was failing tests. And from there, I found out that I had nonverbal learning disability, which is you're highly verbal and you definitely, talk and are very creative and stuff, but you struggle a lot in school. You struggle a lot with math and science and all that stuff, things that I just was not doing well in. And at that point, it was kind of, we were kind of running out of options for college for me. So that is when I went to boarding school.
Okay. And then you said, one of the things that you first mentioned was the loving support of your family. And what was it like for them? And I ask you that because in the military, we move quite a bit. Probably an average soldier or officer or whatever stays at a location 2 years, 3 years, in some rare circumstances, maybe a little bit longer. But it's always difficult for us because for our career to progress, you have to move from in most cases, and you're always balancing that feeling of I'm taking my children away from something that they're comfortable with at a school they're comfortable with, and now I'm uprooting them. And some kids may go through high school, three different high schools, and every other year middle school, grade school. What was it like for them? Like, have they expressed kind of like how they helped you with that?
It was definitely really hard for my whole family because my family is very close. And boarding school was kind of like the last option. But basically, there was this boarding school for kids with learning disabilities like me. And so it was kind of like I knew I needed to do this in order to progress my academic career, in order to get into college and everything. It wasn't easy for them. No, they talked about moving to where I was multiple times. They really wanted to do everything and anything they could to make it less stressful for me. But it was hard, and my mom said too, it was really hard when I was away all those, years ago. It's crazy. High school was like years ago for me, but
Yeah.
just being away from home and stuff, it was really hard for her. It was hard for my dad. My sister was in college at that point, so she wasn't like living at home at that point, but it was hard for all of us because it was a huge adjustment and I was only 16 years old and I was going off to school by myself.
And did the school not only with helping you, probably like a plan to help you learn the best way that you can? Did it also talk about like coping mechanisms or try to help you with any kind of outside pressure or how people might treat you differently?
I think it was more my therapist that taught me more of that sort of coping mechanisms, because I think when I was at boarding school, it was really hard. I was really like just like depressed and like homesick. Like I really missed my family, and my mom is like a saint. She would drive up all the time. I was in Litchfield, Connecticut. I'm from Pittsburgh, so like
Yeah.
she drove all that way all the time just to like get me out. It was just like we were just doing everything and anything we could to get me through it, because
Hmm.
as hard of a decision as it was to send me there, it was something that my mom, my dad, and I all decided that like it was going to be what was best for my future.
Hmm.
So that's kind of where that happened. But as far as learning coping skills and stuff, I really didn't learn many healthy coping skills until later, just because, there were so many kids there too, and they were away from home and homesick, and everyone had their own struggles that they were going through. So I unfortunately developed a lot of unhealthy coping, but as I got older, I definitely figured out what healthy coping was and what healthy coping is not. So
Yeah. Well, you've kind of taken this, struggle, if you will, or people were kind of bullying you, and unfortunately, it's just terrible how people can be sometimes and how they treated you, and you've turned it into something very successful. You can you talk about your book?
yeah, so I, struggled, like I said, a lot with anxiety and depression growing up, and I actually silently struggled for years. But March 15th, 2020, I was in a life-threatening car accident, and I was very lucky to be alive. I'm a Christian, so I truly thought it was God giving me my second chance at life, considering I grabbed my seatbelt seconds before the crash,
Wow.
and the car was totaled. Everyone somehow was alive, but it was a miracle. It truly was. And from there, I kind of realized that it was such a blessing for me to be alive at this point and to be able to get through everything I have and come out on the other side. And so a couple weeks after the car accident, I was sitting on my couch and I was recovering because, they thought I broke my ribs, but luckily they were just like terribly bruised. But I was like with my
Mm.
concussion, just like all my injuries. And, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking about the number two, because I had not only faced death not once, but twice. Once by choice, my freshman year of college, when I did almost take my own life. And once by just praying I'd make it out of there alive, which was my senior year of college. And I knew that that wasn't a coincidence. I knew that that was a bigger purpose. And since I had struggled so much with my own mental health, I realized that I was starting to do really well. I was starting to have this whole new gratitude, this whole new appreciation for life. And I wanted other people to know that they can get through it as well. And that's kind of what inspired me to really write about my story, because I realized I was in the best place of my life. And I know it took a really long time to get there. And
Yeah.
so I just kind of almost thought about like giving back in a way of like to those who were struggling whenever, you know, I was there, like, just having that whole like kind of full circle moment was really kind of important for me.
Yeah. No, I think it's so important. I mean, that I think that's, in military, we have, unfortunately, um, there's that stigma too of people who are committing suicides, and
Right.
because they don't feel like it's ever going to get better. And then you have examples like yourself who lived through it and turned that into something very positive for you, and really helping spread the message of there is hope on the other side of this. There is kind of some light at the end of the tunnel. And I know that's easier to say than when you're actually going through it. When you're going through it, it's a lot of times, from my experience, right? Um, Sometimes goes in one ear, not the other. And but then you see examples like yourself who've turned that around. And I recently had someone who it wasn't a car accident, but it was cancer. She was a
Mm.
cancer survivor, and turned that, and like you said, her faith in God, and faith in him giving a second chance, and that's how she viewed it, and kind of and took that as an opportunity to find her calling. And with you doing this, because I see you also are doing a lot of guest speaking at in
Mhm.
schools, graduations. Can you talk more about that?
So it's really just anything like schools, groups, like really colleges, all of that. Wherever really I get booked is where I go. Every opportunity is a great opportunity. Sometimes it's like conferences, sometimes it's smaller. But regardless of what it is, I think that if I can help one person in each crowd, then I feel like I'm doing something and I'm making a difference because it's not about how many people, it's about just helping that one person.
And are you primarily within the Pittsburgh area, or are you nationwide? Or
I I go wherever, yeah.
oh,
But yeah, I do Pittsburgh for sure, and wherever I get really booked to speak is where I go.
well, that's good. That's good. Yeah, I haven't been back to Pittsburgh in a couple years now, but well, actually last year I think I was there. My daughters played for travel soccer, so we were up near I guess the Riverhound Stadium out there
Mm-hmm.
in
Yeah, like
Orlando.
downtown.
Yeah, yeah. So haven't been back for about a year now, but I think next year we'll be back up there for them to play. Well, good. So what else have you got going on? Any projects or anything you can share? I know sometimes when I ask guests this, a lot of it's kind of kept under wraps because they don't
Yeah.
want to let all their secrets out. But is there anything you can share that you have coming up?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, want to continue speaking as much as I can. Really working on my own brand, building my brand, Unbreakable by Carol, which is my LLC, and trying to do as much of that with podcasts, with as much as I can with social media. I'm really passionate about anti-bullying, so I'm trying to get more involved, with like if I can figure out a way to get on the board of anti-bullying or whatever it is, because I truly think that one of the biggest problems right now with the younger generations is the fact that they're so mean to each other on social media and bullying. And I really am passionate about like helping kids realize like they don't need to give up, and if someone's mean to you, or like if you have a bad experience and someone's bullying you, like just like healthy ways to cope with it, and also being able to talk to someone about it too. I'm really big about open communication because I think that's a huge thing between parents and kids. I think that's also a big thing between therapists and stuff. So I really kind of just am really focusing on doing anything I can to really help the future generations. And so if you need a speaker,
Yeah.
you just have to go to my website and go to book me, and it's pretty simple. And then I just get back to you from that.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely have all your information in the description and make sure that it gets out there. But I'm kind of curious. So not to give out my full age, but before I before I may have graduated high school in 1999, if that gives any indication. But growing up, I don't think until after I graduated college. I think even at that point, like maybe Facebook was just starting,
Hmm.
maybe MySpace, something like that, which I don't even know if you know
Yeah.
what MySpace is, but
Yes, I
okay.
do.
so,
Not
so,
that. I'm not that young. Come on.
I, time goes by quick, and as soon as I learn about a new social media, it seems like the kids are on to something different. But um, that wasn't really a thing, and social media wasn't a thing. All of these the AI obviously was definitely not a thing. Photoshop was, if it was even around, was like very like South Parkish. You just kind of paste the picture on top of somebody and that was it.
Right.
Yeah, and
Right.
we were maybe making photocopies and putting them on the lockers instead of like texting. Um, so we didn't have any of those technology. So how I would recommend someone to deal with that now is like, I got three daughters, and we don't really have them on social media, but they do have like Snapchat and stuff like that. Um, what what are ways that do you recommend kids these days, whether it's on, I don't even know all the social media platforms, but like Instagram, X, what have you? How do you
TikTok.
yeah, how do you possibly block out the noise of all that? I know it's probably impossible, but how do you cope, or how would you even start to even address that?
It's a tough situation to begin with, because when you have your phone and you're constantly scrolling, you can spend hours and totally forget that you're spending all that time on your phone.
Yeah.
But I think that something that I did for myself was I changed my screen time. So like if I'm over a certain amount of time, like my phone will say, okay, like you have like 10 minutes left, and like getting off of it. I think the biggest thing with social media is that it's always consumed, and it's not, people don't have a break from it. And I think that like being a kid, it's so easy to be like, oh, well, like all my friends are on it right now. I have to be cool. I have to be on social media. But really getting off of it, giving yourself time to decompress off of social media is huge. Because when I was in high school, that was when Instagram and Twitter and all that stuff was just starting out, when I was like in ninth grade.
Mhm.
And it was like a very hard thing for me because I was constantly scrolling, seeing the things like I wasn't invited to or like whatever. But it was so toxic because I was always on my phone and I never gave myself time to decompress off of it. And again, at that point, I was only 16 and now I'm 27, and your brain's not fully developed till you're 25.
Mhm.
But how I see it is like if I would have spent less time on my phone, I probably would have seen less of what made me upset or triggered me, or things like that. But when you're constantly on your phone, when you're constantly seeing what everyone else is doing, you start to go down this rabbit hole of like comparison of why your life isn't like the other person's, or how someone's life might look perfect, and you're not actually taking time to be like, wait a second, like this is the highlight reel, that's that. No one else is going to post the real vulnerable moments because people
Right.
are scared to be real and raw. And I think that that's something that, we have to work on as a society, especially for the younger generations. It's like, no, like being vulnerable, being authentic can actually be a good thing, because by you posting something that you might be like, oh my gosh, people are going to judge me for, you might actually have helped someone else. And that's kind of what I tried to start doing with my social media, is like being as real and authentic as possible as I can be, especially with like TikTok. Like I only like to post and like get off of it or spend like an hour a day on it, because if I constantly look at the comments and things like that, sometimes people are mean and you just have to ignore it. When you're a kid, it's definitely a lot easier said than done. But I think that it really kind of goes down to limiting your time on social media, because it's just gotten out of hand.
Yeah. I would. I'd probably argue that even as adults, right, especially
Oh
in
yeah.
especially in, unfortunately, in election season, right? It can
Hmm.
get pretty nasty, and you just
Oh,
kind
for
of
sure.
go, oh my goodness, it's nuts, and then you could fall down that, down that rabbit hole. I mean, the algorithms are set up to keep you on there, right? And
They are, yes.
so next thing you know, your best friend for 20 years may have a different political opinion than you, and then all of a sudden you're fighting, or all the confirmation bias, right? Like, this is what I believe, and everything in my feed is the same thing I believe, so of course I'm right. And so I'm gonna, bully the, in truth, bully the person at work who doesn't see things the way I see them, or who acts different or looks different than I am. um, yeah, it's a challenge. I honestly, I don't, try to keep an eye on my kids, best I can, just to make sure that, and be open with them. And like, I think you brought up a great point, that you have a great family who supported you and loved you. And I try, I don't know if I'm doing it, but I'm trying the best I can. And I make sure I articulate it to them that you can come to me with issues. You can come to me with questions or concerns, or, um, things you're confused about, or if you're being picked on, bullied, or whatever the case is. I think that's something I've really tried to do as a parent, because I can imagine that I can say that as I grew up, and again, there wasn't social media, but any internal stuff, I didn't want to talk to my parents about. Not that I didn't trust them, and not that they didn't care, didn't, but it was to be fair, as again, I already kind of gave away my age. Um, it was a different time when, and I kind of grew up, in the city in Brookline, so it was a little more kind of a blue collar neighborhood, right? Where you kind of just dealt with things on your own, and you, whatever happened, you kind of kept those feelings to yourself, and you kind of did that, and you kind of just sucked it all in and kind of went through it. But can you talk about the importance of having family members who you can trust, that to talk to, and maybe ways a parent can make themselves available, who maybe is not, doesn't realize they're kind of pushing away their kid without knowing about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is the open communication is super important. I think once I started to be open about what was going on in my life, and instead of being like, scared to tell them because I didn't want them to worry, I was like, you know what, this is actually what's going on in my life right now. And this is why I'm stressed. And this is why I'm anxious. And this is why I like feel like I'm gonna have a panic attack. Like, having that open dialogue between parent and kid is so important, because having that kid feel comfortable to come to the parent and openly share their feelings and what they're going through is so crucial. But what I've heard from kids, from past speaking engagements and stuff, is some kids have said to me, "Oh, my parents don't get it. They don't understand. They're not validating." And I always say the number one thing that a parent can do, and my parents were really well at doing that, was being able to validate my feelings. Like, hey, I know you're going through a hard time right now, and maybe I don't understand fully what you're going through, but I want you to know I'm here for you. If you want to talk, I'm here for you to talk. But I promise you, like, we're going to get through it. We're going to figure out ways to, whatever the situation is. And, just having that light, just dialogue, and being able to be like, I get it. I understand you're going through a hard time. Instead of just like, I don't know, like the worst thing you could say to a kid is like, get over it, or like someone has it worse, like, because kids are going to shut down in those situations. And I think that it's so important that there is that conversation with the kid and parent of like, how was your day at school really? How are kids treating you? Are kids being nice to you? Like, really kind of figuring out, because sometimes parents don't even know their kids are getting bullied because their kids aren't going to tell them.
Mhm.
And I think that it's really important, for that aspect of, the anti-bullying and stuff, is like making sure that like exactly what's going on in their day to day. Because I truly think that, like, I mean, my parents were well aware that I was getting bullied, but the school only handled it to a certain degree. So
Yeah.
that's my other kind of thing is I think that schools need to be a little bit more involved as well. But definitely like letting the parents know and keeping the parent informed. When you're in middle and high school, like you're still a minor, like your parent is who is, your guardian, you know what I mean? So it's like they should know everything that's going on. And I think a lot of schools fail to tell parents more about what's going on. I think that it's just really all about communication, because if you can communicate what you really need or what you're going through, or like what you like, even if like it's for you, it's like, oh, like if you're a kid and you're like, I feel really sad all the time. And instead of your parents being like, okay, well, get over it.
Yeah.
Instead of saying that, it's like being like, okay, well, like, what can we do to help you feel better? Should we get you a therapist? Should we, do that? I mean, I was in therapy from a younger age, and I truly think that therapy is a great thing for anyone and everyone. Now, the access to it is a whole other story, and that's a whole other thing that I'm passionate about, because I think every kid deserves to have that mental health care. And it's not fair that some of the resources are not given to them. So I do think that it really kind of comes down to like, what do you need? What can I ask for? And don't be afraid to ask your parents for something. Don't be afraid to even ask your kid, like, hey, what's really going on? Like, because building that connection with your kids, it's something I learned with my parents, and it's something that I realized is so important, and having that support system and the validation, I cannot stress that enough. Validate the feelings, because I promise you, as someone who is going through depression, anxiety, and all the things that I was going through, having them be like, I understand that you're feeling this way, it like just makes you feel heard.
Yes, I I agree. Like, I think one of the things that I've been lucky enough these last couple years is to spend a lot of time around my girls, and so and try to be very present. And I think with that, as you know, right, there's certain tells that a kid will give off, whether it's how they carry themselves, their posture, or just, you know, the difference in how they act when they come home from school, or whatever, or after a game, or after, a performance, or before a performance, right, or before a game, any anxiety or frustrations or anything like that they may be carrying with them, and validating that, right. It's telling them, oh, you're fine, just get over it. That's it's like, oh, it's that easy, great. I can just get over it, perfect. If I only knew. And so,
Yeah.
and I say that, as someone who, in the growing up in the military, a lot of times there was, and even to be honest, growing up in Pittsburgh, there was kind of that stigma of going to behavioral health. Like, it wasn't something that, it didn't seem to be something that was part of a natural, just medical care, that, you go to a doctor if you break your ankle, or, break your leg, you go and get seen. But no, whenever you had any kind of behavioral health issues, that was frowned upon for some reason, even though that's probably a longer term impact than that broken leg, right? And in the military, it was kind of the same
Yeah.
thing, whether it was true or not. There was always a stigma that if you go to behavioral health, that um, it could potentially impact you as a leader and impact you in your career. But um, at some point, and I really truly credit this for helping me become a better parent and honestly a better person, was a few years back I decided to go pursue, we call it behavioral health or mental health treatment in the military, and it totally changed my life. Like, I wish I would have gone through that earlier. Um, it would have helped me so much more in my younger days. And I try to encourage people in the like people who may work for me, or even if they don't, I put it out there that I've gone through um, that kind of care, because I want people to know, yeah, you can still have a great career. You can still be a great parent. You can still be a great kid. That stigma that may have been with you growing up, or that you think is out there, that's not the way to go. Like, you wouldn't, like I said, you wouldn't hold off being seen for a broken leg. This is just another part of your body. Have you seen that
Right.
stigma maybe change in recent years, or is it still something in the civilian side even that is kind of hovering out there?
I think it is still a stigma, and that's why I'm so passionate about what I'm doing. I think it's getting better, but I do think that there still is that stigma. But I also think that it's almost like there's nothing wrong in taking care of your mental health and taking care of you. That should not be frowned upon, because going to get care, or maybe needing a little bit extra therapy. I mean, I even went to outpatient therapy when I was in college, because I was like in a really bad spot. I was like this close to going inpatient, but they were like, well, if you do outpatient, you will be able, like, we'll say no to that. And I was ashamed. I'm not gonna lie, because I was like, I need this level of care that I didn't realize I needed before. And I think there's nothing wrong with going to get help. There's nothing wrong with going to get more, skills and coping mechanisms, and just advice from a therapist or even group, because I think it's supposed to really kind of help you see what you may not have seen before. Because kind of what intensive outpatient therapy is it's kind of like you're almost like shifting your brain, like you're trying to shift your mindset, and so just like the way that you think about things, and the way that you approach situations, and the way that you deal with crises, I can't even say that
Yeah,
right.
they work.
But just like all but like all of that, it's just like everyone should be able to go get care and not have any judgment, because no matter who you are, we all have mental health, and having good mental health all comes down to taking care of your own physical and mental health.
Yeah, I love it. Um, you touched on it briefly, but can you talk more about? And I know this is one of your areas you want to focus on, is the how schools handle
Mhm,
bullying. Can you talk about maybe,
mhm.
what do they have policies now, or what are schools doing to kind of get after this?
This has been something I've been researching a lot actually, because I really do think that schools need to protect kids more. And whether that be there is a no tolerance of bullying with, the kids that are bullying, they get higher consequences because most of these kids just your recess is taken away or like you maybe get suspended. But we need to talk about also like suspension but also expulsion, and like also just like the mandating classes too of empathy and stuff, because some people don't know empathy, and that's a huge thing with bullying too, is like if you're not empathetic to what someone's going through, it's not going to ever have a solution. But I know that there are some schools that are definitely doing more than others, which is why I am very passionate about getting resources in schools, about making sure that kids are having the resources and, the teachers or guidance counselors, the people that they need to talk to, have them there and have it be something more normalized. So it's not like a kid feels weird going to the guidance office or like going and talking to someone, because, when you're bullied, as someone who's been bullied a lot of my life, it's like you build this exterior of like, no one's going to understand it. No one's going to, whatever. But if you can talk to someone and find someone who you trust in your school, or maybe your school has, classes that are, instead of health class, maybe you talk about empathy and bullying, and how high the suicide rates are right now because of bullying. It's something I'm truly passionate about, because I never want kids to feel the way that I felt, and I know how horrible it is. And it's funny, one time I was speaking and this kid asked me, they were like, if you've gotten bullied so bad, why don't you try to hurt people? And I was like,
No.
I said, listen, I don't have hate in my heart. I hope they learned their lesson. I hope they've gotten better. But the truth is, you can't fight fire with fire, because if you get bullied, that doesn't mean you go and bully someone else. That means you figure out, okay, how can I make myself better, in the sense of like, how can I mentally handle this better? Or how can I walk away from it? What are some solutions I can take? I think it all comes down to there needs to be more solutions for the bullying and for protecting the kids, because when they're minors and they're bullying each other, but someone commits suicide because of another kid, that kid should still be held accountable, because
Mhm.
they were a huge reason why. Now, obviously, it's different when you're an adult, but there could be more consequences than there are. And I think that that's something we really kind of have to look into. And, and why I'm so passionate about getting kids this help and care is because every kid deserves to have the same level of mental health care as another one. And, everyone deserves the same resources. And, part of why these kids, do take their own life is because they feel like they don't have the resource, or they don't feel like they can talk to someone. And that's why I stress why it's so important to be able to talk about what you're going through, especially if you're getting bullied. Because once you tell an adult, or once people say, oh, tattling, whatever, but it's like once you get an adult involved, then you can start to figure out some ways to maybe change the situation or change the environment, or like you can figure out a solution from that point on.
Yeah. No, that's great. It's tough. I mean, there was one thing I read on your website too. It was about lunch. And it
Mm-hmm.
made me think, like, talk about a situation where you are essentially alone on an island, because there's no, like, in a classroom there's a teacher to protect you and you're focused on whatever the class is going on. In a lunchroom, you're essentially by yourself, surrounded by groups of kids who are all getting along, and you're not talking to anyone, and there's nowhere you can go. I don't know if schools have I don't know if there's things that schools do now where, like, hey, you have an option of going to the library, because at least there you can read in silence or do something. But how do I mean, is that even something that's being considered? Because that, to me, that's such a vulnerable position, to be alone in a lunchroom if you are being bullied, right? And you have no friends at that in that you may even have friends, but maybe you don't have friends who are in that lunch period with you. I mean, that just struck me as a really vulnerable place of, and maybe a potential
Yeah.
where they can address.
Yeah, that's something that I struggled with a lot too is, I didn't have friends in my lunch. And I was really struggling with my depression at this point and my anxiety. And it was almost like every time I went into lunchroom, I'd be like, I have no idea who I'm going to sit with. I'm going to see if someone will let me sit with them. But like, there were so many times where like I would walk in and I would just walk out and I would just go to the bathroom crying because I didn't have anyone and I felt so alone and I felt so isolated and I felt like no one understood and I felt like everyone else had their friends. And then here again, I was going through the situation of like feeling like I don't fit in, feeling like I don't belong. And, I was in high school almost 10 years ago, which is crazy,
Hmm.
but I don't know what they're doing now. I do hope that they're doing more for that. I think that is something that is definitely overlooked is lunch. Because as someone who struggles with, anxiety even still, like, when you're a kid and you're going to lunchroom, you're anxious and you're like, oh my gosh, like, what am I going to do? Like, that is a huge thing. You think about that every single day because you're like, this is the time where I'm going to have to be like, I don't know, am I going to have to run in the bathroom and cry right now? Like, what am I going to do? And so I constantly had this anxiety of like, what am I going to do? Like, how am I going to get through this? And yeah, I mean, I think that if there were options of going to the library or, you know, if you're struggling in a class, maybe talk to a teacher and see if they'd be willing to work with you. If you're getting bullied too, a lot of teachers are very empathetic, and I'm sure some of them would be willing to work with some kids of like, hey, like, why don't we use lunch as this will be a time to tutor, but also you'll get to be in the classroom and you won't have to go and deal with seeing everyone sitting together and not knowing where to sit. Like literally, as I'm saying this, I have flashbacks to when I did go through that lunchroom. I'm just
Yeah.
like, I have no idea what I'm gonna do right now. Like I literally like I did not like I wanted to die. Like I
Hmm.
was in such a bad place and I was like, I don't even care. I'm just going to the bathroom and crying. It was like I had this dark cloud over my head every single day and it was such a hard thing to overcome, but I don't want other kids to ever feel that way either. And so I think that, schools changing some policies on like, not seeing assigned lunch seating, but like, having alternative options for kids who maybe were like me and who didn't have any friends and who didn't know where to go, having alternatives or something like that would be a really helpful thing.
Yeah. Well, and I definitely can feel you, the anxiety part of that. Like I could feel my chest getting heavy just thinking about it, like that
Yeah.
burning.
Yeah.
And, but it's amazing what you've done to not only continue to build yourself up and overcome this, or if not overcome, put processes in place to kind of mitigate any kind of it going too far again, right? So it's just a kudos to you for your strength, and then
You.
for not only making it, not only for your strength to do what you've been doing, but also the courage um, to get out there and put your story out there. And like you said, if one kid hears it and it changes their life, like which I'm sure has already happened, um, that says a lot. I mean, that's a lot of people would probably hold a lot of resentment and not kind of just shut that part out of their life and say, no, I'm not going to care about it and whatever. But here you are trying to make a difference in the world. And so it's great to see. It really is.
Thank
Um,
you. Thank you. That means a lot.
have you, I know, you mentioned about getting on a council, like are you talking like political, like maybe work in a state or local government for getting on some kind of a school board to kind of work the issue of the bullying?
I mean, maybe school board, maybe like a organization. I have been doing research on that recently, but I want to make sure I get all my facts right before I figure out how I'm going to go about it. All I know is that there's not enough being done for these kids right now, and it has to change at some point. And whether or not people agree or disagree, it's like these kids deserve to have a lot less traumatic childhood slash, well, not traumatic childhood, but like, just like the teen years, the adult years, like going to school should not be as anxiety inducing as it is. And I know it because I went through it. And so I just really do hope that I can figure out a way to make a difference and to, you know, figure out a way to find a solution, whatever that is, because this can't keep happening. We can't keep losing kids to suicide because of bullying. I mean, there is there are so many things ahead for them, and when you're like 13, 14, 15, 16, like you're not thinking of it like that, but it's just like it's not fair to them. And it is why I'm so passionate about it, is because I was that middle schooler who was getting bullied, but I actually came home and wasn't on social media. But these kids now are constantly hearing this on social media, or they're just constantly getting bullied. And for that, I think there needs to be more accountability because, the phones and everything, like, I think also too, like, maybe some parents don't know their kids are bullying, but maybe they do. And, it all comes down to too, like, how, I'm not a parent, so I don't know, but it's just also like how you raise your kids too, like, and raising that kid. Cause I know one day when I have a daughter, I want to be like, you want to be that person who stands up when no one else does and stick up for that person, because that is the person with integrity, and that is the person who is going to really help that kid and change that kid's life. I mean, had I had that, who knows how different my life would have been.
Yeah, I think a great point you bring up are some parents, do they know what's going on, and 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 if they know, do they care? Like, or are they just like, it's just kids do this, kids being kids, and I don't think that's the case.
Yeah,
Like,
no,
I don't think there's any
it's not.
room. Yeah, there's no room for this.
It's not fair, and it's not fair to these kids who are going through this traumatic bullying. And I've seen so many stories recently, and I'm trying to get more involved too with that too, because these stories that I'm seeing about these 13-year-old, 14-year-old kids, it breaks my heart, and I want to be able to use my voice for them, because you know I want to continue showing people that your words and your actions and how you treat people, it matters. If you're mean to someone, if you're saying hurtful things to someone, you might not think anything of it. But to them, like me, I would come home and internalize and hate myself and would just like self harm. And it was just a really depressing downward spiral that I wouldn't, I would hope that no one else would have to go through that.
Yeah. Well, we've talked almost 45 minutes. It went by pretty quick. I mean, it's kind of a not a not a I won't say a great topic, because you're a great speaker, but it's a hard topic because
It is.
the lives it impacts, especially when you're talking kids and teenagers, and as a parent, how you would handle a situation like this. But I think it's a very important topic, and one that I think all of us, one way or another, are going to be facing throughout our lives, our kids' lives, grandkids' lives, whatever the case. And hopefully, I hope to see you on some high level board, or president's council or department, whatever it takes to continue to get your message out there, to get your voice out there and make a difference. Because I think the difference between a lot of people and people like you is a lot of people will talk about issues. You're actively trying to solve issues. And for that, I thank you. As a father, of 3 young girls, I thank you and hope, there's more voices like yours out there to help make a difference. And I'll be sure to put all of your links, your booking and your book, and basically your entire link tree. I'll have in the description so that people know how to reach you and get a hold of you. And I truly want to thank you for taking time out of your day to talk to us today.
Yeah, for sure. And if I can just say one more thing, in my
Yeah.
link tree, I recently added about there was a story about Aubrey Wyatt, and she was a 13-year-old girl who took her life. And I found out recently that there was a GoFundMe for her, just like getting justice and stuff, since the kids are still bullying after her death. And so I put that as my top one there. So if you see donate to the foundation, do that. Like, I don't know the family personally or anything, but I do really commend Heather for doing what she's doing, because I can't imagine losing a child, and it's not fair. So I do hope
Well,
people really
I'll
donate
be
to that.
sure to I'll be sure to put that link. I'll be sure to put that link separate right up top and everything else, along with your other links too. That
Perfect.
way, people don't have to go to Linktree to find everything. They'll just click on that, and because that's a great cause, but also make the ease of access for all of your accounts and for this one as well. But thank you so much for coming
Perfect.
on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
All right.